How could signing everything away, my house, my car, my money, leave my wife so shaken she forgot how to smile? What did I know that made her own lawyer lose his temper in court while I sat there calm as a lake? This is how I gave up everything she asked for but walked out with my dignity and delivered the kind of payback you only see in stories like this. The morning sun streamed through the pristine windows of our new kitchen, casting golden light across the marble countertops that Lana had insisted we needed. 2 months. We'd been living in this dream house for exactly 2 months, and already I could feel the weight of it crushing our marriage like a vice. "Evan, your coffee mug is leaving rings on my countertop again," Lana said without looking up from her phone, her manicured fingers dancing across the screen in rapid succession. My wife of 12 years spoke to me like I was a careless houseguest who'd overstayed his welcome. I glanced at my ceramic mug, the one Mason had painted for me at summer camp last year, with "World's Best Dad" scrawled in uneven blue letters. It sat on a coaster, same as always. "It's on a coaster, Lana." She finally looked up, her green eyes flashing with that familiar mixture of irritation and disappointment that had become her default expression whenever she looked at me. "The coaster isn't big enough. The condensation drips down the sides." She gestured vaguely at the spotless marble. "This isn't some cheap laminate like at the old place." The old place, our first home together, where we'd brought Mason home from the hospital, where we'd hosted birthday parties and holiday dinners, where we'd been happy before Lana decided that happiness wasn't enough. "Morning, Dad." Mason bounded into the kitchen, his backpack slung over one shoulder, hair still messy from sleep. At 9 years old, he was all elbows and knees, growing so fast I swear I could see it happening in real time. "Hey, buddy." I ruffled his hair, earning a grin that reminded me why I put up with everything else. "Ready for the math test today?" "We studied all those fractions last night. I think I've got it." He grabbed an apple from the bowl on the counter and took a massive bite. "Don't eat over the counter," Lana snapped, still not looking up from her phone. "Crumbs get in the grain of the stone." Mason's face fell slightly, and he moved to stand by me instead. I put a protective hand on his shoulder, feeling the familiar surge of anger that came whenever Lana's perfectionism trampled over our son's simple joy. "Who's texting you so early?" I asked, nodding toward her phone, which had been buzzing constantly for the past 10 minutes. "Work stuff," she said quickly, but I caught the slight flush that crept up her neck. "Gregory is organizing the quarterly reports. You know how demanding he can be." Gregory Shields, Lana's coworker at the marketing firm, recently promoted to senior partner. Wealthy, charming, and everything I apparently wasn't. He'd been coming up in conversation more and more lately, always with that particular tone of admiration that made my stomach clench. "Maybe Gregory should learn about work-life balance," I said mildly, taking another sip of my coffee. "It's 7 in the morning. Lana's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Not everyone can coast through life at your pace, Evan. Some people have ambition." The words hit their mark, same as always. I was a mechanical engineer at a mid-sized firm, steady work with decent pay, but nothing glamorous. Nothing that impressed Lana's mother or her new circle of friends. Nothing that paid for marble countertops and luxury SUVs. Mason looked between us, his apple forgotten in his hand. "Why don't you and Mom laugh anymore?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Lana finally set down her phone, but instead of answering, she stood and smoothed down her designer dress, the one that cost more than my monthly car payment. "I need to get to work early today. Gregory wants to review the Peterson account before the client meeting." She grabbed her purse, a leather monstrosity that could have fed a small family for a week. "Evan, can you handle the school drop-off? I know it's not exactly rocket science." Another dig. Another casual dismissal of everything I did to keep our family running while she climbed her corporate ladder. "Of course," I said, keeping my voice level for Mason's sake. "Have a good day." She paused at the doorway, her expression softening slightly. For a moment, I thought she might say something kind, something that reminded me of the woman I'd fallen in love with in college. Instead, she said, "Don't forget, the Hendersons are having their barbecue this weekend. Try to wear something nicer than usual. First impressions matter in this neighborhood." The front door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Mason and me alone in our beautiful, suffocating kitchen. "Dad?" Mason's voice was small. "Are you and Mom going to get divorced like Tommy's parents?" I knelt down to his level, looking into eyes that were so much like mine, serious and thoughtful, too old for his age. "Hey, where did that come from? You guys don't talk anymore, not really, and Mom always looks angry when she looks at you." He picked at the strap of his backpack. "Tommy said his parents did that too before his dad moved out." My heart clenched. How do you explain to a 9-year-old that his mother has outgrown the life she chose? that success and money have become more important than the family we'd built together. Sometimes grown-ups go through difficult times, I said carefully. But no matter what happens between your mom and me, we both love you very much. That will never change. It wasn't really an answer, but it was all I could give him. That evening, the neighborhood barbecue was in full swing when we arrived. The Hendersons had spared no expense. Professional catering, a bartender, string lights creating a magical ambiance in their perfectly manicured backyard. It was the kind of party that screamed success and belonging, everything our new neighborhood valued. Lana had changed into a flowing sundress that hugged her curves in all the right places. She looked stunning, and she knew it. Within minutes of our arrival, she was holding court near the pool, laughing at something Gregory Shields was whispering in her ear. I watched from across the patio as Gregory's hand lingered on her lower back, as she tilted her head in that particular way that meant she was flirting. My wife was flirting with another man at a neighborhood party, and I was standing there with a beer in my hand, pretending not to notice. Tough break, man. I turned to find Jared Hanks, our next-door neighbor, standing beside me with his own beer and a sympathetic expression. Jared was a few years older than me, a quiet guy who worked in IT and understood what it was like to be overlooked in a crowd of alpha personalities. "What do you mean?" I asked, though we both knew exactly what he meant. "Lana and the golden boy over there?" Jared nodded toward the pool area where Gregory was now openly stroking Lana's arm as she laughed at another of his jokes. "Half the neighborhood's talking about it. Sorry, I figured you knew." The beer in my hand suddenly tasted like ash. "How long?" "Few weeks, maybe?" Started noticing them at the coffee shop in the mornings, always deep in conversation. Then last weekend saw them having lunch at that fancy place downtown. Didn't look much like a business meeting. I should have been angry. I should have marched over there and confronted them both. Instead, I felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest. A strange sense of clarity, like puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. "Thanks for telling me," I said quietly. Jared studied my face, probably expecting more of a reaction. "You okay?" "Yeah." I took another sip of beer, my eyes never leaving my wife and her new interest. I'm starting to see things clearly for the first time in months. As if sensing my gaze, Lana looked over at me. For just a moment, her expression faltered, a flicker of guilt or maybe defiance. Then Gregory said something that made her laugh, and she turned away, dismissing me as easily as she dismissed everything else about our life together. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A calendar reminder. Loan payment due Monday. Check docs. I pulled out my phone and stared at the notification. The house payment, the car lease, all the beautiful, expensive things that Lana had insisted we needed to fit into this new life she'd envisioned for us. A slow smile spread across my face as I deleted the reminder. I wouldn't be needing it much longer. The next morning found me in my home office, a converted corner of the garage that Lana had grudgingly allowed me to claim as my workspace. Surrounded by filing cabinets and engineering manuals, it was the one place in our new house that still felt like mine. I pulled out the thick folder labeled Property Documents and spread the contents across my desk. Mortgage papers, loan agreements, title documents, insurance policies, the financial skeleton of our new life, all bearing my signature and my credit score. The house had been a stretch from the beginning. Lana had fallen in love with it the moment she saw the listing. 5 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, a gourmet kitchen, and a price tag that made my accountant's soul weep. But she'd been so excited, so animated in a way I hadn't seen in months, that I'd convinced myself we could make it work. "Think about Mason," she'd said, her eyes bright with possibility. "He could have his own playroom, and friends could come over without us being embarrassed about the space. We deserve this, Evan. We've worked hard enough." What she meant was that she'd worked hard enough. My steady engineer's salary was respectable, but not spectacular. It was Lana's rapid rise in the marketing world, her increasing bonuses and commissions, that had made the bank even consider approving our loan application. I flipped through the pages, remembering how carefully I'd structured the financing. The down payment had wiped out most of our savings, and the monthly mortgage was aggressive but manageable, assuming both our incomes remained stable and our marriage remained intact. The car documents told a similar story. Lana's luxury SUV, leased rather than purchased because the monthly payments were lower and she wanted something appropriate for client meetings. Another financial obligation tied to our combined income and credit. My phone rang, interrupting my review. Trish Dalton's name appeared on the screen. "Patricia Dalton, Family Law," she answered in her crisp, professional tone when I called her back. "Trish, it's Evan Carver. Thanks for taking my call." "Of course. What can I do for you?" I'd found Trish through a colleague whose brother had gone through a messy divorce. She had a reputation for being practical, thorough, and unimpressed by emotional theatrics. Exactly what I needed. I think my wife is going to file for divorce, I said without preamble. I want to understand my options. There was a pause. I see. Are you looking to contest the filing, or are you thinking about filing first? Neither. I want to give her everything she asks for. Another pause, longer this time. Mr. Carver, I'm going to need you to be more specific. When you say everything, the house, the cars, the savings accounts, the furniture, whatever she wants. I just want shared custody of our son. That's unusual. Most people in your situation want to fight for their fair share of the marital assets. Can I ask why you're taking this approach? I looked around my cluttered office at the life I'd built that was apparently no longer good enough. Because I want this to be over quickly and cleanly. Fighting will just make it expensive and ugly, and my son doesn't deserve that. Mr. Carver, I have to advise you that giving up all your assets could leave you in a very difficult financial position. Alimony, child support, starting over from scratch. I understand the risks, I interrupted, but I also understand my wife. She wants the lifestyle more than she wants the battle. If I give her what she wants without a fight, maybe we can keep this civil. Trish was quiet for a moment. All right, if that's really what you want, I'll prepare the paperwork. But I strongly recommend you think this through carefully. Once you sign those documents... I know. Thank you, Trish. I'll be in touch. I hung up and returned to my documents, but my concentration was broken by the sound of raised voices from the kitchen. Through the thin wall that separated my office from the main house, I could hear Lana talking to someone on the phone. Told you, Mother, he's not going to fight it. Evan's too passive to make waves, especially if it means disrupting Mason's life. Denise Mercer, Lana's mother. The woman who had never thought I was good enough for her daughter and had never bothered to hide that opinion. No, Gregory hasn't said anything definitive yet, but I can tell he's interested. He's been asking about my plans, whether I'm happy in my marriage. Very subtle, very professional. I closed my eyes, listening to my wife plan my replacement. The house will be the tricky part, but it's mostly in my name anyway because of my credit score. And honestly, Evan's so guilty about the whole thing that he'll probably just sign everything over to avoid conflict. The casual confidence in her voice was like a knife between my ribs. She had it all figured out. The divorce, the house, the new relationship waiting in the wings. I was just an obstacle to be managed, not a person whose feelings mattered. I know. Mason will adjust. Kids are resilient, and Gregory's great with children. He'll be a much better role model than Evan ever was. That was the line that broke something inside me. Planning to replace me as a husband was one thing, but replacing me as Mason's father was something else entirely. I heard the click of heels on hardwood as Lana ended her call and headed upstairs. A few minutes later, the shower started running. I waited until I heard her moving around in the bedroom, then made my way to the kitchen. Her phone sat on the counter where she'd left it, face down but still glowing from recent use. I knew I shouldn't look, knew it would only confirm what I already suspected, but I couldn't stop myself. The screen showed a text conversation with Gregory Shields. I scrolled up, my stomach sinking with each message. Gregory, dinner tonight? I know a place where we won't run into anyone from the office. Lana, can't tonight. Family barbecue, but soon. Gregory, I'm tired of being careful. When are you going to tell him? Lana, soon. I'm working up to it. He suspects something, but he won't make a scene. Not his style. Gregory, good. I want to be able to take you out properly, not sneak around like teenagers. The messages went back weeks. Flirtatious exchanges, lunch plans, late-night conversations about their future together. My wife had been conducting a full emotional affair, possibly physical, while I was upstairs helping our son with homework. I set the phone back down exactly where I'd found it, my hands surprisingly steady. The anger I'd expected didn't come. Instead, that same cold clarity from the night before settled over me like armor. Lana wanted out of our marriage. She wanted the house, the lifestyle, and the successful new boyfriend to go with it. She thought I was too weak and too guilty to fight back. She was about to learn how wrong she could be. That afternoon, I picked Mason up from school as usual. He climbed into my aging Honda Civic, the practical car that Lana was always complaining about, and buckled his seatbelt with the automatic efficiency of routine. How was the test? I asked as we pulled away from the curb. Good, I think. Mrs. Patterson said we'd get the results tomorrow. He was quiet for a moment, then said, Dad, what does upgrading mean? Depends on the context. Why? I heard Mom talking to Grandma Denise about upgrading. She said you can't upgrade a person, but maybe you can upgrade a situation. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Where did you hear that? This morning, before school. Mom was on the phone in her room, but the door was open. Mason picked at his backpack strap, a nervous habit he'd developed recently. Do you think Mom wants to upgrade our family? Out of the mouths of babes. Therm, my 9-year-old son, had picked up on what I'd been trying to ignore for months. Sometimes people change, buddy. Sometimes they want different things than they used to want. I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. But no matter what changes, you and I are a team. That's never going to change. He nodded, but I could see the worry in his eyes. Kids always know more than adults think they do. That evening, Lana came home later than usual, claiming she'd been in client meetings all day. She was animated and cheerful in a way that felt forced, asking about Mason's day and commenting on the dinner I'd prepared with exaggerated enthusiasm. "This looks wonderful, honey," she said, settling into her chair with a bright smile. "You're such a good cook." The endearment felt like sandpaper against my skin. When was the last time she'd called me honey and meant it? "How was work?" I asked, cutting into my chicken. "Get those quarterly reports sorted out with Gregory?" Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Oh, yes. Very productive day. Gregory's really impressed with the Peterson campaign strategy." "He seems like a hands-on manager," I said casually. "Texting you at all hours, calling meetings at the last minute. He's just thorough, detail-oriented." She took a sip of wine, avoiding my eyes. "You'd probably like him if you met him properly." The irony was suffocating. My wife was trying to sell me on her affair partner's good qualities. "Maybe we should have him over for dinner sometime," I suggested, "since you work so closely together." Lana's laugh was too high, too bright. "Oh, I don't think that's necessary. He's very busy with his own social life." After dinner, while Lana helped Mason with his homework, I retreated to my office and called Trish back. "I want to move forward," I told her. "How quickly can we get the paperwork ready?" "If you're certain about this approach, I can have everything drafted by the end of the week. But Evan, I have to ask, are you sure you want to be this generous? Most divorce settlements involve some negotiation, some back and forth. You're essentially handing her everything on a silver platter." I looked at the property documents spread across my desk, thinking about loan obligations and lease agreements and the beautiful trap I'd unknowingly built around us both. "Trust me, Trish, I know exactly what I'm doing." The cafe where Lana had suggested we meet for lunch was one of those trendy places with exposed brick walls and artisanal coffee that cost more per cup than I used to spend on lunch. It was also, I realized as I walked in, the same cafe where Jared had seen her with Gregory. She was already seated at a corner table, looking polished and professional in a way that reminded me why I'd fallen for her in the first place. But there was something different about her posture, a confidence that seemed newly acquired, like she was trying on a new version of herself. "Thanks for meeting me," she said as I sat down, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I know this is awkward, but I thought it would be better to talk somewhere neutral." "About what?" I asked, though we both knew exactly what. She fidgeted with her wedding ring, turning it around her finger in a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times when she was nervous. "Evan, I think we both know this isn't working anymore." The words hung between us like a challenge. I could have made her say it explicitly, could have forced her to spell out exactly what this meant, but I found I didn't have the energy for games. "You want a divorce," I said simply. Relief flooded her face, quickly followed by something that might have been guilt. "Yes, I think it's best for everyone, including Mason." "Including Gregory?" Her face went pale, then flushed red. "I don't know what you think you know." "I know you've been having an affair." I kept my voice level, conversational. "I know you've been planning this conversation for weeks. I know you think I'm too weak to fight you on it." She stared at me, her mouth slightly open. This wasn't going the way she'd rehearsed it. "Evan, it didn't start out as an affair. Gregory and I just connected, professionally at first, and then you decided you deserve better than what we built together." "That's not fair." Her voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. She lowered it again, leaning forward. "We've been growing apart for years. You have to admit that." "Have we? Or have you just been growing toward someone else?" She sat back in her chair, her defensive posture crumbling into something more honest. "I can't keep pretending to be happy, Evan. I can't keep living a life that feels too small for who I've become." There it was, the truth beneath all the careful explanations and justifications. I wasn't enough anymore. Our life wasn't enough. Mason and I were holding her back from the bigger, better existence she'd convinced herself she deserved. "What do you want?" I asked. "I want us to handle this like adults. I want to make sure Mason is protected and that we can both move forward with our lives." What do you want, Lana, specifically? She pulled a folded piece of paper from her purse, smoothing it out on the table between us. It was a handwritten list, neat and organized like a grocery list for dismantling our marriage. The house, obviously. Mason needs stability, and it makes sense for him to stay in the same school district. She glanced up at me. You could get an apartment nearby, something small but nice. I nodded, saying nothing. The SUV, since it's more practical for driving Mason around. You can keep your car, of course? Of course. My practical, embarrassing Honda Civic that she'd complained about for years. Joint custody, but I think Mason should live with me primarily. You can have him every other weekend, and we can work out holidays. Every other weekend, I would go from being a full-time father to being a visitor in my son's life. The savings accounts should probably be split proportionally based on our contributions, since my income has been higher recently. She continued down her list, carving up our life with the same efficiency she brought to her marketing campaigns. Everything had been thought through, calculated, optimized for her benefit while maintaining a veneer of fairness. When she finished, she looked at me expectantly. What do you think? Does that seem reasonable? Very reasonable, I said. You've clearly put a lot of thought into this. Relief flickered across her face again. I'm glad you're being so mature about this. I was worried you might try to make things difficult. Why would I make things difficult? You've obviously already moved on. Gregory must be excited about your new living arrangement. Her cheeks flushed again. Gregory and we're taking things slowly. This isn't about him. Of course not. She studied my face, looking for signs of anger or hurt that I was careful not to show. Evan, I want you to know that this doesn't mean I regret our marriage. We had good years together, and Mason is the best thing that ever happened to either of us. But people change. I've changed, and I think if you're honest with yourself, you'll admit that you've been feeling it too. The distance, the sense that we're just going through the motions. She wasn't entirely wrong. I had felt the distance, had noticed how we'd become like polite strangers sharing a house, but I'd attributed it to stress, to the pressures of the new mortgage and her demanding job. I'd thought it was something we could work through together. I'd been naive. So, what happens now? I asked. I'll file the papers next week. My lawyer says it should be pretty straightforward since we're in agreement about the major issues. She folded her list and put it back in her purse. I've already talked to a realtor about getting the house appraised, just to make sure we're being fair about the equity. She'd already talked to a realtor. She'd been planning this divorce for weeks, maybe months, while I was helping Mason with his homework and trying to figure out why my wife seemed so distant. You've thought of everything, I said. I've tried to be thorough. I want this to be as painless as possible for all of us. Painless. As if there was a painless way to dismantle a family. The cafe door chimed, and I looked up to see Gregory Shields walking in, scanning the room until his eyes found our table. He was tall and polished, with the kind of easy confidence that came from success and money. Everything I apparently wasn't. Oh, Lana said, following my gaze. Gregory, what a surprise. But it wasn't a surprise. I could tell by the way she straightened in her chair, by the way her smile became more radiant. This was planned, another piece of her carefully orchestrated revelation. Gregory approached our table with the smooth stride of a man who'd never doubted his place in the world. Lana, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just grabbing coffee before the Henderson meeting. His eyes flicked to me with polite curiosity. You must be Evan. I've heard so much about you. I stood and extended my hand. Gregory, I've been hearing a lot about you, too. His handshake was firm, confident, the grip of a man marking his territory. Lana speaks very highly of you. She's mentioned what a dedicated father you are. Mason's a great kid, I said. Easy to be dedicated to. I'm sure he is. Lana's told me wonderful things about him. Gregory's smile was warm and genuine, which somehow made everything worse. I hope I'll get the chance to meet him soon. The presumption in that statement hung in the air like smoke. He was already planning to be part of Mason's life, already envisioning himself in my role. Well, Lana said quickly, Gregory should probably get going. Big client meeting this afternoon? Of course. Gregory turned back to me. Evan, I want you to know that I have nothing but respect for you and the family you've built with Lana. I hope we can all handle this situation with maturity and grace. The situation. As if my marriage ending was just another business problem to be managed efficiently. I'm sure we can, I said. Lana's very good at handling situations. After Gregory left with his artisanal coffee and his easy smile, Lana and I sat in silence for a moment. The pretense was gone now, the careful fiction that this was just about our marriage growing apart. "How long?" I asked. "It's not what you think?" "How long, Lana?" She sighed, deflating slightly. 3 months, maybe 4. It started as just conversations, work stuff, but then you realized he could give you the life you really wanted. He understands my ambitions. He doesn't think I'm reaching too high or moving too fast. The words came out in a rush, defensive and angry. He sees my potential instead of just worrying about mortgage payments and practical concerns. There it was. The real problem wasn't that our marriage had grown cold. It was that I'd become an anchor weighing down her soaring ambitions. Gregory was a rocket ship, and I was gravity. "I see," I said quietly. "Evan, I didn't plan for this to happen. I fought it for months because I knew it would hurt you and disrupt Mason's life, but I can't keep living a lie." "You're right," I said, standing up from the table. "You shouldn't have to live a lie." She looked surprised by my easy agreement. "So you'll work with my lawyer on the details?" "I'll have my lawyer contact yours. We'll get everything sorted out quickly, just like you want." Relief and something that might have been disappointment flickered across her face. Maybe part of her had wanted me to fight for us, to prove that our marriage was worth saving, but that ship had sailed the moment she started planning my replacement. "Thank you," she said softly, "for being so understanding about all this." I nodded and walked away, leaving her sitting alone at the table where she'd just dismantled our life together. As I reached the door, I heard her phone buzz with a text message, probably Gregory, asking how it went. That afternoon, I drove to the bank where we'd gotten our mortgage, ostensibly to update some paperwork, but really to confirm what I already suspected. The loan officer who had handled our application, Isla Rivers, was friendly and helpful as she pulled up our account information. "Everything looks good with your payments," she said, scrolling through the details on her computer screen. "Right on schedule. The house should be paid off in about 28 years at the current rate. And if someone wanted to assume the loan, transfer it to their name? Well, they'd have to qualify on their own, based on their individual income and credit score. We'd need to run all the same checks we did for the original application." She looked at me curiously. "Are you thinking about refinancing?" "Something like that. What about the car lease, if someone wanted to take that over?" "Car leases are a bit trickier. The new person would have to qualify for the payments and agree to take on the full term of the lease, including any penalties or fees." She paused. "Is everything okay, Mr. Carver?" "Everything's fine," I said. "Just planning ahead." That evening, I sat in my office reviewing the documents Trish had prepared. The divorce agreement was exactly what Lana had asked for. Generous to the point of being foolish, giving her everything she wanted without a fight. But buried in the legal language were the details that mattered. The house transfer included all associated debts and obligations. The car transfer included the full lease agreement and payment schedule. Everything Lana wanted came with strings attached, strings she hadn't bothered to examine. My phone rang. Trish's number. "Evan, I've been thinking about our conversation, and I have to ask one more time. Are you absolutely certain about this approach? You're essentially giving away your financial future." "I'm certain," I said, looking at the loan documents spread across my desk. "Trust me, Trish. I know exactly what I'm signing." "All right, but I want it on record that I advised against this level of generosity." "Noted. How soon can we file?" "I can have everything ready by Monday. Are you sure you don't want to at least try to negotiate some of the terms?" I thought about Lana's confident smile, about Gregory's presumptuous handshake, about the casual way they'd discussed upgrading Mason's life by removing me from it. "No negotiation," I said. "Give her exactly what she asked for." The law offices of Brennan, Kowalski, and Associates occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming downtown tower, the kind of building that screamed success and expensive hourly rates. Francis Morrow, Lana's attorney, had chosen the location for their first mediation session, and I could tell it was meant to intimidate. Lana sat beside her lawyer, looking polished and confident, her hair styled in a way that made her look younger and more successful. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a navy blue suit that projected authority while maintaining just enough femininity to seem approachable. Everything about her presentation said, "Reasonable woman making reasonable requests." Morrow himself was exactly what I'd expected from Lana's description. Mid-50s, silver-haired, with the kind of practiced charm that came from decades of dismantling marriages for profit. His handshake was firm, his smile warm, and his eyes calculating as they assessed me. "Mr. Carver, thank you for coming in today. I understand you and Lana are hoping to handle this dissolution amicably, which is always refreshing to see." He gestured to the conference table, where neat stacks of documents waited like place settings at a dinner party. "Shall we get started?" Trish sat beside me, her expression professionally neutral, but her posture tight with unease. She'd spent the drive over making one last attempt to talk me out of what she called a financial catastrophe, but I hadn't budged. Give Lana everything she wanted, exactly the way she'd asked for it. Before we begin, Morrow said, opening his leather portfolio with theatrical precision, I want to commend you both for choosing mediation over litigation. It shows maturity and consideration for your son's well-being. He was good, I had to give him that. Starting with praise, establishing himself as the reasonable authority figure guiding us toward an equitable solution. But I could see the predator beneath the polish, the man who'd built his reputation on maximizing his clients' gains while minimizing their opponent's leverage. Now then, he continued, Lana has prepared a preliminary list of her requests, which I believe she's already shared with you, Evan. Let's go through each item and make sure we're all on the same page. He slid a typed document across the table, Lana's handwritten list from the cafe, now formatted in legal language and expanded with additional details I hadn't seen before. First, the marital residence. Given that Mason will be living primarily with Lana, it makes sense for her to retain the house. This provides stability for the child and maintains his connection to his school and community. I nodded, scanning the document. The house transfer was listed as a simple asset division, with no mention of the mortgage obligations or payment responsibilities. Second, vehicle allocation. Lana will retain the 2023 Lexus SUV, as it's more suitable for transporting Mason and conducting her business activities. Evan will retain the 2018 Honda Civic. Again, the lease obligations weren't mentioned, just a clean transfer of assets, as if the cars were paid-off possessions rather than ongoing financial commitments. Third, custody arrangements. Joint legal custody with primary physical custody to Lana. Evan will have visitation every other weekend, alternating holidays, and 4 weeks during summer vacation. Every other weekend. The phrase hit me like a physical blow every time I heard it. 12 years of daily fatherhood reduced to scheduled visits. Fourth, financial support. Given the disparity in current incomes, no alimony will be requested. Child support will be calculated according to state guidelines based on the custody arrangement. Generous of her, not asking for alimony. Of course, she wouldn't need it once Gregory was in the picture. And finally, division of marital assets. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, and personal property will be divided proportionally based on documented contributions. Morrow set down the document and smiled at me with practiced warmth. As you can see, Lana's requests are quite reasonable. In fact, I'd say they're generous in several respects. Many clients in her position would ask for significantly more. Trish shifted beside me, and I could feel her disapproval radiating like heat. She'd been expecting me to negotiate, to push back on at least some of the terms. Instead, I was about to hand Lana the victory of her dreams. It all looks fair to me, I said calmly. I agree to the terms, as presented. The silence that followed was profound. Morrow's practiced smile faltered slightly, as if he'd misheard me. Lana's eyes widened, and she leaned forward in her chair. All of it? She asked. Just like that? Just like that. I looked directly at her. You've clearly thought this through carefully. I see no reason to drag things out with negotiations. Morrow recovered quickly, but I caught the flash of suspicion in his eyes. In his experience, divorces were battles, and people didn't surrender without a fight unless they had something to hide. Mr. Carver, that's very generous of you, but I feel obligated to point out that you might want to take some time to consider these terms more carefully. Perhaps discuss them with your attorney. I have discussed them with my attorney, I said, glancing at Trish, who looked like she was trying to swallow something bitter. And I've made my decision. I want this process to be as quick and painless as possible for everyone involved, especially Mason. But Evan, Lana said, her voice carrying a note of genuine confusion, are you sure you can afford to... starting over completely, finding a new place to live. I'll manage. I met her eyes across the table. I'm good at adapting to new circumstances. The subtle emphasis on new circumstances wasn't lost on her. A flush crept up her neck as she realized I was talking about more than just the divorce. Morrow cleared his throat, regaining control of the conversation. Well, if you're both in agreement, we can move forward with drafting the final documents. I'll need a few days to prepare everything properly. Actually, Trish said, speaking for the first time since we'd sat down, I've taken the liberty of preparing our own version of the agreement, incorporating all of Lana's requests. She slid a thick folder across the table. Morrow's eyebrows rose slightly as he opened it and began scanning the pages. This is quite thorough, he said after a moment. You've included very specific language about asset transfers and obligation assumptions. My client believes in being precise, Trish replied smoothly. We want to make sure there are no misunderstandings about who's responsible for what going forward. I watched Morrow's face as he read through the documents, looking for any sign that he understood what he was seeing. But the legal language was dense and technical, and he was reading quickly, more interested in the broad strokes than the fine details. "Everything seems to be in order," he said finally. "Lana, would you like to review these before we proceed?" Lana glanced at the papers, but her attention was focused on me. She was still trying to process my easy capitulation, looking for the catch that surely had to be coming. "If it's what Evan prepared, and it gives me what we discussed, then I'm fine with it," she said. "I trust that you'll make sure my interests are protected." Trust. The word hung in the air like an accusation. She trusted her lawyer to protect her interests, just as she'd trusted Gregory to fulfill her ambitions, just as she'd once trusted me to be the husband she deserved. "Excellent," Morrow said, closing the folder with satisfaction. "I'll review everything in detail over the next few days, and we can schedule a signing session for early next week." As we prepared to leave, Lana caught my arm in the hallway outside the conference room. "Evan, are you sure about this? You're being awfully accommodating. I told you, I don't want to fight. Fighting won't change the outcome, and it'll just make things harder for Mason." She studied my face, looking for signs of hidden anger or resentment. "You're not going to try to get revenge or make this difficult later, are you?" The question was telling. She knew she was getting a better deal than she deserved, and some part of her was waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Lana, all I want is for this to be over so we can all move on with our lives. You'll have everything you asked for, and I'll have my time with Mason. That's enough for me." Relief flooded her features, followed quickly by something that might have been guilt. "You're a good man, Evan. I hope you know that. This isn't about you not being good enough." "I know exactly what this is about," I said quietly, "and I hope you get everything you're looking for." That evening, I sat in my office reviewing the final documents one more time. Every detail was perfect, every clause precisely worded to give Lana exactly what she'd requested while ensuring she understood the full scope of what she was receiving. The house transfer included not just the property, but all associated mortgages, liens, and payment obligations. The car transfer included the full lease agreement, with Lana assuming responsibility for all monthly payments, maintenance costs, and end-of-lease fees. The bank accounts she was claiming came with their associated loan guarantees and credit obligations. It was all legal, all properly documented, and all exactly what she'd asked for. She wanted the lifestyle. Now she could pay for it herself. My phone buzzed with a text from Mason. "Dad, can we go to the park tomorrow? Mom said she has to work." Of course she did. Gregory probably had plans for the weekend, and Lana was prioritizing her new relationship over her son's needs. It was a pattern that would only get worse once the divorce was final, and she no longer had to maintain the pretense of being a devoted mother. I texted back, "Absolutely. We can get ice cream after." His response was immediate. "Yes, you're the best dad ever. The best dad ever. For now." But once the custody arrangement took effect, I'd be relegated to every other weekend status, watching from the sidelines as Gregory took over my role in Mason's daily life. Unless, of course, Lana found herself too busy dealing with the financial realities of her new independence to focus on playing house with her upgraded family. I closed the folder and leaned back in my chair, allowing myself a small smile. In 3 days, we'd be in court for the final signing. Lana would get everything she'd asked for, exactly as she'd requested it, and then the real education would begin. The weekend before our court date passed in a strange bubble of normalcy. Lana was unusually cheerful, humming as she made breakfast and asking about my plans with an interest she hadn't shown in months. She was already mentally moved on, I realized, treating me with the kind of friendly consideration you'd show a house guest who was leaving soon. "I was thinking," she said Saturday morning as I helped Mason tie his shoes for our park outing, "maybe we should tell him about the divorce today. Together, I mean. It might be easier if it comes from both of us." Mason looked up at me with those serious eyes that seemed too old for his face. "Tell me what?" Lana and I exchanged glances. We'd been dancing around this conversation for weeks, both knowing it had to happen, but neither wanting to be the one to shatter our son's world. "Buddy," I said, kneeling down to his level, "your mom and I need to talk to you about some changes that are going to happen in our family." His face went very still. "Are you getting divorced?" The question hit like a punch. He'd known all along, had been waiting for us to stop pretending everything was normal. "Yes," Lana said softly, sitting down on the couch so she was at his eye level too. "We are, but that doesn't mean we love you any less, or that we're not going to be your parents anymore." "Where will I live?" His voice was small, practical. 9 years old and already trying to figure out the logistics of his broken family. "You'll live here with me," Lana said, "but you'll spend lots of time with Dad too. Every other weekend and holidays and summer vacation." "Every other weekend?" Mason looked at me with something close to panic. "But what about our Tuesday movie nights, and helping with homework, and when I have bad dreams?" The questions cut deeper than any lawyer's document could, all the small, daily moments of fatherhood that couldn't be scheduled or quantified in a custody agreement. "We'll figure it out, buddy," I said, pulling him into a hug. "The important thing is that both your mom and I will always be here for you, no matter what." "Is it because of Gregory?" he asked, his voice muffled against my shoulder. Lana's face went white. "What do you know about Gregory?" "I've seen him at school pickup, and I heard you talking about him on the phone." Mason pulled back to look at both of us. "Are you going to marry him instead?" "Sweetheart, this isn't about Gregory," Lana said quickly. "This is about your dad and me realizing we want different things in life." "But Gregory will live here with us?" "Maybe eventually. But that's not something you need to worry about right now." Mason nodded solemnly, processing information with the gravity of a much older child. "Will Gregory try to be my new dad?" "No one could ever replace your dad," Lana said firmly, and for a moment I heard an echo of the woman I'd fallen in love with. "You'll always have your real dad, no matter what." After Mason went to bed that night, Lana and I sat in the living room with a bottle of wine, talking more honestly than we had in months. "He took it better than I expected," she said, curled up in the corner of the couch that had always been her favorite spot. "He's been preparing for it. Kids always know more than we think they do." "I feel terrible about disrupting his life like this." She took a sip of wine, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" It was the first time she'd expressed any doubt about her decision, and I found myself studying her face in the lamplight, looking for signs of the uncertainty I'd been hoping to see. "Are you having second thoughts?" "Not about the divorce," she said quickly, "but about the timing, the way we're handling it. Maybe we should have tried counseling first, or—" "Lana, you've been having an emotional affair for months. You've already chosen your next relationship. Counseling isn't going to fix that." She flinched at the directness of my words. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I didn't plan to fall for someone else while we were still married. "But you did, and now we're here." "I know you must hate me," she said quietly. "I know this makes me the villain in our story." I considered that. Did I hate her? I'd expected to, had braced myself for the kind of bitter anger that consumed people going through messy divorces. Instead, I felt something closer to pity. She was about to get everything she thought she wanted, and she had no idea what it was really going to cost her. "I don't hate you," I said honestly. "I'm disappointed, and I'm hurt, but I don't hate you. You're still Mason's mother, and you're still the woman I shared 12 years of my life with." Tears gathered in her eyes. "You're being so generous about all of this. The house, the car, not fighting me on custody. I know I don't deserve it." "You deserve to be happy, Lana. If Gregory can give you what I couldn't, then I hope it works out for you." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "Thank you. For understanding, for making this easy. I know it can't be what you wanted." "It's not," I agreed. "But fighting won't change the outcome. This way, at least we can try to stay civil for Mason's sake." What I didn't say was that I was counting on her gratitude to keep her from examining the divorce documents too closely. Her guilt over the affair, combined with my apparent generosity, had made her careless about the details. She was so focused on getting what she wanted that she wasn't paying attention to what she was actually getting. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that seemed appropriate for the end of a marriage. I dressed carefully in my best suit, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I wanted to look like a man who knew exactly what he was doing. Trish met me in the courthouse lobby, her expression grave as she reviewed the final documents one last time. "Last chance, Evan," she said quietly. "Are you absolutely certain about this? And once you sign these papers, there's no going back." "I'm certain." "And you understand that you're essentially giving away your financial future? The house alone represents nearly $200,000 in equity." "I understand exactly what I'm giving away," I said, watching Lana and her legal team enter the building. "And what I'm giving it away with." Morrow was all smiles and handshakes, treating the occasion like a business merger rather than the dissolution of a family. He'd brought an associate with him, a young woman who carried herself with the hungry efficiency of someone trying to prove herself worthy of partnership. "Evan, good to see you again," Morrow said, pumping my hand with practiced enthusiasm. "Ready to get this wrapped up?" "More than ready." Lana looked nervous for the first time since this process had started. She was dressed in a conservative black dress that made her look like she was attending a funeral, which wasn't far from the truth. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she kept checking her phone for messages that I suspected were coming from Gregory. "How are you feeling?" I asked her as we waited for the courtroom to open. "Nervous, sad, relieved." She managed a weak smile. "All at once, I guess. You?" Ready for it to be over. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, more like a conference room than the grand judicial chambers you see in movies. Judge Patricia Hendricks was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and an efficient manner, the kind of person who'd probably overseen hundreds of divorces and knew how to keep the proceedings moving smoothly. "Good morning," she said as we took our seats. "I understand we have an uncontested dissolution today, with all parties in agreement on the terms?" "That's correct, Your Honor," Morrow said, standing with theatrical formality. "My client and Mr. Carver have reached an amicable agreement on all issues related to property division, custody, and support." "Excellent. Mr. Carver, I understand you're representing yourself today?" "I have counsel present," I said, nodding toward Trish. "But yes, I'm comfortable proceeding." "And you've had adequate time to review all documents and understand the terms of the agreement?" "I have, Your Honor." "Very well. Let's review the major provisions to ensure everything is clear." What followed was a methodical reading of our divorce agreement, each clause spelled out in careful legal language. The house transfer, including all associated mortgages and payment obligations. The vehicle transfer, including the full lease agreement and associated costs. The custody arrangement that would reduce my time with Mason to a fraction of what it had been. With each item, Judge Hendricks asked if I understood and agreed to the terms. With each item, I answered clearly and calmly that I did. Lana's confidence grew with each exchange. She sat up straighter, her smile becoming more genuine as the reality of her victory sank in. She was getting everything she'd asked for, exactly as she'd requested it, with no fight and no complications. Morrow was practically glowing with satisfaction. An easy win with a generous settlement was exactly the kind of case that built reputations and generated referrals. His client was happy, the process had been smooth, and he could bill his full rate for minimal effort. "Mr. Carver," Judge Hendricks said finally, "before we proceed to signatures, I want to make sure you fully understand what you're agreeing to. You're transferring significant assets to your wife while retaining responsibility for very few marital debts. Are you certain this is what you want to do?" "I'm certain, Your Honor. I believe this arrangement is in everyone's best interests." "And Mrs. Carver, you understand that you're receiving these assets along with all associated financial obligations?" "I do, Your Honor," Lana said confidently. She'd heard the phrase associated financial obligations several times now, but it was clear she understood it to mean minor administrative details rather than substantial ongoing costs. "Very well. Let's proceed to signatures." The moment had arrived. Months of planning, weeks of preparation, and now it all came down to putting pen to paper. I signed each document carefully, my handwriting steady and clear. No hesitation, no last-minute doubts, just the methodical execution of a plan that had been months in the making. Lana signed with a flourish, her relief evident in every stroke. When she finished the last document, she looked up at me with something that might have been gratitude. "Thank you," she mouthed silently. I nodded and smiled. She had no idea what she was thanking me for. Judge Hendricks reviewed the signed documents, checking each signature and initial. "Everything appears to be in order. The dissolution is granted, effective immediately. The property transfers will be processed according to the terms outlined in your agreement." And just like that, it was over. 12 years of marriage, dissolved in less than an hour of paperwork and legal formalities. As we gathered our things to leave, Morrow approached me with his practiced smile. "Evan, I have to say, this was one of the most amicable proceedings I've ever been part of. You should be proud of how maturely you've handled this situation." "Thank you," I said. "I believe in taking responsibility for my choices." "Well, Lana is very fortunate to have such a reasonable ex-husband. Not everyone would be so generous." Generous, if he only knew. Outside the courthouse, Lana caught up with me as I walked toward my car. "Evan, wait." She was slightly out of breath, her heels clicking on the wet pavement. "I just wanted to say, I know this wasn't easy for you, and I want you to know that I'll never forget how gracious you've been about everything." "I hope you'll be happy, Lana. I really do." "I will be, and I'll make sure Mason knows what a good man his father is." I got in my car and drove away, leaving my ex-wife standing in front of the courthouse where she'd just won the most expensive victory of her life. The real show would begin when she got home and started reading the fine print. 3 weeks later, I was in my new apartment, a modest 2-bedroom place 15 minutes from Mason's school, when my phone rang. Lana's name appeared on the screen, and even before I answered, I could guess what this call was about. Evan. Her voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the underlying panic. We need to talk. What's wrong? The mortgage payment is due tomorrow, and the bank is saying I owe $3,800. That can't be right. I set down the coffee I'd been drinking and leaned back in my chair. Did you call them to ask about it? Of course I called them. They said since the house transferred to my name, I'm responsible for all payments going forward. But Evan, I can't afford $3,800 a month. My salary doesn't cover that kind of payment. What about Gregory? I thought he was moving in to help with expenses. There was a long pause. Gregory and we've decided to take things slower. He's not ready to move in together yet. Translation. Gregory had gotten cold feet when he realized that dating Lana was one thing, but taking on her financial obligations was something else entirely. I see. Well, the house payment is what it is, Lana. That's what we agreed to when we bought the place. But I assumed you'd keep making the payments since your name is on the original loan. My name was removed when you assumed the mortgage. It's all in the divorce documents. I didn't realize. Evan, I can't afford this. I need to sell the house. That's certainly an option. Although you should probably check the current market value against what we owe. Real estate has been volatile lately. Another pause, longer this time. What do you mean, what we owe? What you owe, I corrected gently. The remaining mortgage balance is about $420,000. You'd need to check with a realtor about current market values in the neighborhood. I heard papers rustling, probably loan documents she was seeing clearly for the first time. Evan, this says the house was only appraised at $410,000 when we bought it. How can we owe more than it's worth? Interest, fees, the way the loan was structured, plus the market's been soft in our area. A lot of houses are sitting for months without selling. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, uncertain. The car payment is due this week, too. $1,500. I thought car payments were supposed to be $300 or $400. It's a lease, not a purchase. Luxury vehicles have higher monthly costs. But $1,500? Every month? Every month for the next 3 years, plus insurance, maintenance, and any excess mileage or wear charges when you turn it in. I could hear her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. Evan, I can't afford this. I can't afford any of this. My take-home pay is maybe $6,000 a month. After the house and car payments, I'd have less than $1,000 left for everything else. What about your bonuses? Your commissions? They're not guaranteed, and with the Peterson account in flux. She trailed off, and I suspected Gregory's romantic distraction had affected her work performance. I need help. Can you take back the house? Put it in your name again? I'm afraid that's not possible. The divorce decree is final, and the property transfers are complete. The house is yours, along with all the associated obligations. Then what am I supposed to do? It was a genuine question, asked with the desperation of someone who was finally seeing the full scope of the trap they'd walked into. For the first time since this whole process began, Lana was asking for my help instead of demanding her due. You have several options, I said calmly. You can try to refinance the house at a lower payment, though that would require qualifying on your income alone. You can sell the house and take whatever loss is necessary. You can try to find a roommate to help with expenses. A roommate? Evan, I'm 35 years old. I can't have some stranger living in my house with Mason. Then you'll need to make some other arrangements. What if we got back together, just temporarily, until I can figure things out financially? The offer hung in the air like a desperate Hail Mary. She was willing to swallow her pride and take back the husband she'd discarded, at least until she could afford to discard him again. That's not going to happen, Lana. But if it's just temporary? No. The finality in my voice seemed to break something in her. I heard a sob, quickly stifled, then the sound of her trying to pull herself together. I trusted you, she said finally. I trusted you to be fair about this. I was fair. I gave you exactly what you asked for. You knew I didn't understand the financial implications. You let me sign documents without explaining what they really meant. You had a lawyer, Lana, a very expensive lawyer who was supposed to protect your interests. If he didn't explain the terms of the agreement to you, that's between you and him. Francis said everything looked standard. He said you were being generous. Francis Morrow, who'd been so focused on his easy win that he'd failed to read the fine print of the documents he was approving. I wondered how that conversation had gone when Lana called to ask why her legal fees had bought her such expensive gifts. I was generous, I said. I could have fought you on custody, on the property division, on a dozen different issues. Instead, I gave you everything you asked for. This isn't what I asked for. It's exactly what you asked for. You wanted the house. You got the house. You wanted the car. You got the car. You wanted the lifestyle and the independence to pursue your relationship with Gregory. Now you have all of that. I can't afford it. Then you'll need to make some choices about what's really important to you. The line went quiet, except for the sound of her crying. When she spoke again, her voice was broken, defeated. What about Mason? I can't take care of him properly if I'm struggling financially. It was the question I'd been waiting for, the inevitable moment when her maternal instincts would collide with her financial reality. Mason is always welcome to stay with me, I said. As much as you need, for as long as you need. You mean, change the custody arrangement? I mean, whatever's best for Mason. If you need him to stay with me while you sort out your living situation, we can make that work. Another long pause. Would you consider taking primary custody, just until I get back on my feet? There it was. The woman who'd fought for primary custody because she wanted to control Mason's life was now ready to hand him over because she couldn't afford to maintain the lifestyle she'd demanded. If that's what you think is best for him, yes. It would just be temporary, she said quickly. Once I figure out the money situation, once I get settled somewhere I can afford. Of course. But we both knew it wouldn't be temporary. Once Mason was settled with me, once he was back to his normal routine of daily fatherhood instead of weekend visits, neither of us would want to disrupt that again. I should go, she said finally. I need to call some realtors, see what my options are. Lana? Yeah? For what it's worth, I really did hope you'd be happy. I know, she whispered. I know you did. After she hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment and thought about the choices that had led us to this moment. Lana had wanted to upgrade her life, to trade in her steady but unexciting husband for a more exciting model. She'd gotten exactly what she'd asked for: the house, the car, the freedom to pursue her new relationship. What she hadn't counted on was the cost of that upgrade, or the fact that Gregory Shields was more interested in dating a successful marketing executive than supporting a financially struggling single mother. My phone buzzed with a text from Mason. Dad, can I come stay with you this weekend? Mom seems really stressed about something. I texted back immediately. Of course, buddy. I'll pick you up after school on Friday. Within 6 months, Mason was living with me full-time while Lana tried to rebuild her life in a small apartment across town. The house had eventually sold, but at a loss that wiped out what little savings she'd received in the divorce. The car had been repossessed when she fell behind on the lease payments. Gregory had quietly faded from the picture once it became clear that Lana's upgrade had turned into a financial downgrade. Apparently, ambition was only attractive when it came with stability and success. I never said, "I told you so." I never gloated or pointed out the irony of her situation. When she called to check on Mason or arrange visits, I was polite and supportive. When she needed help with something, I provided it if I could. Because in the end, this hadn't been about revenge. It had been about giving someone exactly what they thought they wanted and letting them discover the true cost of their choices. Lana had wanted everything, and now she knew exactly what everything was worth. As I sat in the courthouse that final day, watching my ex-wife realize that her victory was actually her defeat, watching her lawyer's confident smile crumble as the reality of what they'd agreed to became clear, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not satisfaction, not vindication, but simple peace. The kind that comes from knowing that justice doesn't always require punishment. Sometimes it just requires patience and the willingness to give people exactly what they ask for. The courtroom fell silent as the final implications sank in. Lana's face went white as she understood that she'd just signed herself into financial ruin.